Before we begin this story, I need to extend an invitation to you. If you enjoy true mysteries, dark stories, and cases that seem impossible to explain, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications, because each story here might stir something you didn't even know existed within you. And tell me something, where are you watching this video from? The road leading to the mansion didn't appear on the most recent maps. It was as if time had decided to forget it, leaving it to the silence and the vegetation that advanced without haste. Even so, it existed, narrow, surrounded by tall trees that blocked almost all the light of the late afternoon. It was along this road that the black car slowly advanced, raising small clouds of dust as it approached its destination. Inside the vehicle were 4 people who shouldn't have been there. Lucas drove with his eyes fixed on the road, avoiding looking to the sides. There was something about that place that bothered him even before they arrived. He didn't believe in ghost stories, but he also didn't completely ignore certain instincts. And that silent warning that tightened his chest, didn't seem like something that could be easily ignored. In the passenger seat, Renata held her cell phone trying to get a signal. Nothing, not a single bar. She sighed, annoyed, and then looked ahead, where the road began to open up. "It's here," she said, unable to hide the tension in her voice. Behind them, Caio and Fernanda exchanged glances. Neither of them seemed comfortable, but they weren't willing to give up either, not after everything they had heard. The mansion finally emerged among the trees. Huge, silent, intact. It was impossible not to feel the weight of that place. Built at the height of the wealth of a man few truly knew, the house seemed more like a monument than a residence. The tall windows reflected the darkening sky, but there was no sign of life inside. No lights, no movement, nothing. Lucas stopped the car a few meters from the iron gate, which was ajar. That was strange enough. An abandoned place, but still open. "This isn't right," he murmured. Renata opened the door before anyone could answer. "That's what they said about all the places we investigated," she replied, trying to sound confident. "And yet here we are." But it wasn't the same. None of the other places carried that feeling, that heavy presence that seemed to press down on the air around it. Caio then got out of the car, looking at the mansion with a mixture of fascination and discomfort. "Did you see what they said about this place?" he asked. "It's not just abandoned. People have disappeared here." Fernanda also got off the bus, hugging her own body as if she were cold, even though the air was still and warm. "People are disappearing everywhere," she said, but her voice faltered slightly. Renata started walking towards the gate, ignoring everyone. She's always been like that, determined, obsessed. She was the one who chose the locations. She was the one who insisted on continuing. And it was because of her that they were there now, in front of the richest and most mysterious mansion in the United States, a place surrounded by stories that no one could prove, and that no one seemed willing to investigate thoroughly. They said the original owner had amassed his fortune in questionable ways, that he never trusted anyone, that he built the house like a fortress full of hidden passages, rooms that didn't appear on the original plans, and security systems that continued to function even decades after his death. But that wasn't the most disturbing thing. That's what came next. Employees who resigned without explanation, visitors who were never seen again, reports of lights being left on in the early hours of the morning, even though the place is officially empty. And more recently, a group, just like them, entered the property and simply disappeared. No signs of a struggle, no clues, no way out. Lucas slammed the car door shut, as if he could still back out at that moment. But he said nothing. He simply followed the others. The gate creaked as it was pushed. The sound echoed strangely, as if absorbed by the invisible walls of the place. They went inside. The garden was overgrown with weeds, but curiously there were parts where the vegetation seemed controlled, as if someone or something still cared for that space. Fernanda noticed first. "Are you guys seeing this?" No one responded immediately, because everyone was watching. The path to the main door was too clear, as if it had been used recently. Renata stopped in front of the mansion's entrance. The dark wooden door was enormous, adorned with details that suggested wealth and power. But there was something else there. Almost imperceptible marks, like scratches or signs of something trying to get out. She placed her hand on the doorknob. For a second, he hesitated. That was the only moment of doubt he showed. Then it turned. The door opened slowly, revealing the dark interior. The smell came first. An old, musty smell. But not exactly one of abandonment. There was something more, something that none of them could identify immediately. Lucas took a step back. "We should leave." But nobody moved, because at that moment one thing became clear to everyone. They weren't just entering an abandoned house, they were crossing a line, and deep down everyone felt it, even if they wouldn't admit it, that perhaps there was no way back. The interior of the mansion absorbed the light as if it had a life of its own. Even with the door open behind them, the late afternoon light seemed not to extend beyond the entrance hall. It was as if the space rejected any attempt to be illuminated. The marble floor was still intact, though covered by a thin layer of dust that betrayed the absence of visitors, or at least of visitors leaving. Each step echoed unevenly, creating the feeling that sound didn't behave naturally inside. Renata was the first to step forward. His eyes scanned every detail with almost obsessive attention. It wasn't just curiosity, it was something deeper, a need to find answers, even if he didn't know exactly what questions he was trying to solve. She stopped before a large painting on the wall, an old portrait darkened by time. A man with a stern expression, dressed in formal clothes, watched anyone who dared to enter. "It must be him," Caius murmured, approaching. "The original owner. The man who built all of that." No one knew for sure how he died. Some said it was from illness, others that he disappeared inside his own house. But the most repeated version was specific. He never left the house. Lucas looked away from the portrait. He didn't like the way the eyes seemed to follow him. "Let's focus," he said, trying to bring everyone back to reality. "We go in, record everything, and leave, without exploring too much." Renata did not respond. "I was already walking towards a corridor on the left, where the darkness seemed denser." Fernanda hesitated before following her. "Did you notice?" she whispered to Caio. "What? There are no signs of looting." That was true. For a place abandoned for so long, everything seemed too well preserved. Furniture in place, objects intact, no broken glass, no typical signs of break-in or vandalism, as if nobody dared to touch anything, or as if no one had managed to get out and tell. Caio ran his hand over a side table. The dust was fine, almost uniform. That doesn't make sense. Lucas, still near the entrance, looked around with heightened attention. He wasn't like Renata. He wasn't there out of obsession or curiosity. His motivation was different, to protect the group, to ensure that everything ended well. But for the first time since they began this type of exploration, he wasn't sure he would succeed. The group moved forward down the corridor. The walls were lined with dark wood, and closed doors lined either side. Some had old plaques with inscriptions that were almost faded. Renata chose one at random and opened it. The room seemed frozen in time, a perfectly made bed, heavy curtains drawn, a wardrobe ajar, revealing old clothes still hanging inside. Fernanda entered slowly, running her fingers over the fabric of one of the garments. "This shouldn't be here." "Why?" Caio asked. "Because someone would have taken it. Or at least moved it. This place looks untouched." Renata could no longer hear me. His eyes were fixed on something in the corner of the room, a small door, almost imperceptible. She approached and tried to open it. It was locked. "There's more here," he said, with a different glint in his eye. Lucas appeared at the bedroom door. We're not going to just start opening everything up. That's exactly what we came to do, Renata retorted without looking at him. The tension between the two was long-standing. Lucas always tried to set limits. Renata always ignored them. Caio intervened, trying to calm things down. Perhaps it would be better to map it out first, to see the size of the place before opening hidden doors. Renata hesitated, but eventually gave in. For now. They went back into the hallway. Further on, a staircase led to the second floor, while another passageway descended to what appeared to be a lower level. Lucas pointed upwards. It's best to start from the top floor. If something happens, the exit is closer. But Renata was looking down, into the darkness. Places like this hold the worst in their basement. Silence. Fernanda looked away, clearly uncomfortable. So that's exactly why we don't start there, Lucas said firmly. For a few seconds it seemed like Renata was going to insist, but something changed. A sound, low, almost imperceptible, coming from somewhere in the house. Everyone froze. "Did you hear that?" Fernanda whispered. No one responded immediately, but everyone had heard. It wasn't the sound of wood creaking, not even the wind. It was different, like a slow drag, distant, and then it stopped. The silence that followed was even worse. Lucas took a deep breath. It must be the structure of the house, but even he didn't seem convinced. Caio looked down the hallway behind them. For a moment, he had the feeling that something had changed. As if the space wasn't exactly the same as before. "We need to take it slow," he said. Renata finally looked away from the stairs leading down, but not by their own choice. It was because at that exact moment, one of the doors in the hallway, one they were sure was locked, moved slowly, alone. A small gap opened up, dark, silent, inviting and threatening at the same time. No one came near. Nobody spoke. Because everyone understood the same thing at the same time. They weren't exploring that place. Something inside. I had already noticed their presence. The sound of the door still seemed to echo in everyone's minds, even after it had completely ceased. The small, dark opening in the hallway no longer moved, but its presence was enough to alter the surrounding atmosphere. It wasn't just an open door, it was an invitation, or perhaps a warning. Lucas was the first to react. "Nobody touches that." His voice came out firmer than he felt. He took a few steps forward, positioning himself slightly ahead of the group, as if he could protect them from something he couldn't even see. Renata, on the other hand, did not back down. Her eyes were fixed on the dark crack. It didn't frighten her, at least not in the usual way. What she felt was something else, a silent, almost irrational attraction. "That's no coincidence," she said softly. "This place reacts." "Or it's just an old house falling to pieces," Lucas retorted, though his own conviction was weakening by the second. Caio ran a hand over his face, trying to organize his thoughts. "Doors don't open by themselves like that." Fernanda said nothing. Her eyes scanned the hallway with growing unease. She had a different perception than the others. She noticed small details, subtle changes, and something there was profoundly wrong. "We are not alone," he said, almost in a whisper. The silence that followed was heavy. Renata finally approached the door. Lucas tried to stop her, but she was already ahead. "Just a look," she said. With a slow movement, he pushed the door open. The creaking was louder this time. The interior revealed a narrow, almost claustrophobic space, a kind of utility room or auxiliary passageway. There were no windows, only darkness and a more intense, more organic smell. Caio turned on his cell phone's flashlight and pointed it inside. The walls were different, older ones, marked. There were risks, several, irregular overlapping lines, as if someone had tried to mark something repeatedly. Days, weeks, maybe years. Fernanda put her hand to her mouth. "This isn't decoration." Lucas entered right behind Renata, observing attentively. "It might just be deterioration." "No!" Caio interrupted. "Someone else did that." The beam of light moved further into the background. And then he found something that made everyone freeze. On the ground, almost hidden by the dust, there were marks, drags, as if something or someone had been pulled into that space. Renata took another step. The floor creaked under his weight. And then a dry, crackling sound echoed through the house. Everyone turned around immediately. The sound came from the hallway, at the main entrance. Lucas practically ran out of the small room. No. When they arrived in the entrance hall, the air seemed even heavier. The door through which they had entered was locked, fully, without any sign of wind, without explanation. Fernanda ran up to it and tried to open it. Nothing. It's locked. Lucas forced the doorknob, pushing it with his shoulder. The wood didn't budge even an inch. That's not possible. Caio looked around, his heart racing. We didn't touch her. Renata stayed a few steps behind. For the first time, his expression changed. It was no longer just curiosity. It was understanding. I told you, he said slowly. This place reacts. Lucas turned to her, annoyed. Stop it. Houses don't react. But her voice no longer carried the same strength as before, because deep down he knew too. That wasn't normal. A new sound interrupted any attempt at rationalization. Steps coming from upstairs, boards, heavy, dragged. Everyone automatically looked towards the staircase. Nothing, just darkness, but the sound continued, one step, then another one. As if someone, or something, were walking along without any hurry, observing, waiting. Fernanda backed down. We need to get out of here now. We already tried, said Caio, looking at the closed door. Lucas took a deep breath, trying to regain control. Okay, then we'll find another way out. He pointed to the hallway. Kitchen, backyard, there's always something. Renata didn't move immediately. His eyes were still fixed on the staircase. The sound had stopped. Suddenly, as if he knew he was being watched. He knows we're here, she said, almost inaudibly. Who? Fernanda asked, her voice trembling. Renata finally looked away. Who has never left here? The group started moving again, now in a hurry. The hallway looked different, longer, darker. The doors weren't exactly in the same positions. Caio noticed first. This wasn't like this before. Lucas ignored it, focused on finding a way out. But as they moved forward, the feeling became impossible to deny. The landscape was changing, the walls seemed closer, the denser air, and then one of the doors on the right opened violently, a dry bang. Everyone stopped. The interior was completely dark. But there was something there, something that didn't need to be seen to be felt. An immediate chill ran through everyone's body. Fernanda began to cry softly. We shouldn't have come. Lucas took a step back. For the first time, not knowing what to do. Renata, however, he took a step forward, slowly, as if she were being pulled. There's someone here, she said, and then, from the darkness, a sound. It wasn't a step. It wasn't a drag. It was something closer to breathing, flavor, irregular, old. The conflict was now clear. They weren't just prisoners. They were being led away. And every decision, every step, it seemed to draw them even closer to something that had no intention of letting them escape. The corridor is no longer just a path. Now it was a trap. Each step they took seemed to shift them to a slightly different space, as if the mansion were rearranging its own structure to keep them inside. The sense of direction vanished completely. What had once seemed like a simple path now transformed into a silent, living labyrinth. Lucas took the lead once more, but his movements were no longer steady. He analyzed every detail, trying to find patterns, any logic that still existed in that place. We need to mark the path, he said. Caio quickly took a key from his pocket and scratched the wall. A harsh sound echoed down the hallway. Okay, if we pass by here again, we'll know. They continued. 10 steps, 15, a curve, and then they stopped. The same risk was there, on the wall, exactly the same. Fernanda immediately backed away. No, that's not possible. We turned around, Lucas said, trying to convince himself. There was no curve, Kaio replied curtly. The silence that followed was broken by a distant sound, this time, more clearly, something metallic, a light impact, like a door closing somewhere else in the house. Renata was different, quieter, but no less involved. His eyes scanned everything with increasing intensity, as if he were trying to assemble an invisible puzzle. "He doesn't want us to leave," she said finally. Lucas lost his temper. "Stop it! The house! That doesn't make sense." Renata turned slowly to face him. "Then explain." Lucas did not respond, because there was no explanation, and everyone knew it. Kaio tried to change the subject. "We need to understand what happened to the other people who came here." Fernanda nodded, still shaken. If someone disappeared, perhaps they left something behind. That's when they realized. One of the hallway doors was ajar, unlike the others. There was something on the ground. Lucas approached first, cautiously. It was a backpack, old, covered in dust, but not enough to seem forgotten for decades. Kaio recognized it even before opening it. This belongs to the group that came here." He knelt down and slowly unzipped his pants. Inside, there was equipment, lanterns, cameras, and a notebook. Renata picked up the notebook without hesitation. The pages were filled with hurried notes, shaky handwriting, and interrupted sentences. She began to read in a low voice. "The house is not fixed. The corridors change. Don't trust the doors." Fernanda approached, looking over her shoulder. "Is there more?" Renata turned a few pages. The notes were becoming more chaotic, more desperate. "He observes. He learns. He uses us." Lucas closed his eyes for a second. "Use it like?" Renata turned the last page. There was only one sentence, written forcefully as if the writer were in a panic. "He needs us to come in." Silence. Kaio swallowed hard. "That doesn't make sense." "Yes, it does," Renata said slowly. "The house doesn't just hold you captive for the sake of holding you captive. It feeds on that, on movement, on presence." Fernanda shook her head, trying to reject it. No, that's crazy." But then a new sound. This time, closer, much closer. Steps. In the same hallway. Everyone turned around immediately. Nothing. But the sound didn't stop. It was as if something was walking outside the field of vision, always one step further. Lucas pulled Kaio by the arm. "We're not staying here." They left the room quickly, leaving their backpacks behind. But something remained, a feeling, as if they were no longer just being watched, but studied. As they walked along, Fernanda began to notice something different. The walls, the risks, some were not recent, some were old. Very old, layers upon layers, as if many people had tried the same thing, to mark the paths, finding solutions, fail. "We're not the first," she said, her voice faltering. Renata remained silent, but his mind was racing. The pieces were starting to fall into place. The house was not just a space, it was a system, a mechanism, and they were inside it. Kaio looked back one more time, and for a brief second, he saw something. At the end of the corridor, a silhouette, high property, observing. He blinked. It disappeared. "There's someone here," he said, now without any doubt. Lucas did not respond, because at that moment, a new door opened before them, this time revealing a narrow staircase, going down, to the basement. Renata stopped, and for the first time since they entered, she smiled, but it wasn't a smile of relief. It was a time of understanding. "It's down there," she said. "That's where it begins, and where it ends." Fernanda held her arm. "We're not going down." Renata looked at her, calm, free. "We've already gone downstairs." Silence, heavy, irreversible. The conflict now had new layers. They weren't just trapped in a place that was changing. They were inside something that I was learning from them, who used her fears. And that, little by little, he led them exactly where he wanted them to go. The staircase seemed narrower as they descended. There was no handrail, Just rough walls of old concrete, damp to the touch, as if that place were breathing from within the earth. The air grew heavier with each step, harder to draw into the lungs. Lucas went down first, not out of courage, but out of necessity. If something was waiting, he wanted to be the first to see it. Behind him, Caio illuminated the steps with his cell phone flashlight, while Fernanda followed closely behind, gripping her own arm tightly, as if that kept her anchored to reality. Renata was coming last, no rush, as if he already knew exactly what he would find. The sound of footsteps echoed unevenly, as if the surrounding space distorted even the time between one movement and another. And then, the floor ended. They arrived in the basement. The space was large but suffocating. There were no clear divisions, only thick pillars supporting the low ceiling. The beam of light revealed stains on the walls and on the floor. They weren't just stains, they were brands, old, dark, accumulated over time. Fernanda immediately looked away. "We need to go upstairs. Now." But nobody moved, because something there was impossible to ignore. At the center of space, there was a chair, made of metal, fixed to the ground, and all around it, deep marks scratched the concrete, as if something had been dragged repeatedly in circles. Caio swallowed hard. This is more than just a house. Lucas slowly approached the chair. There were handcuffs attached to the metal arms, rusty. But they are still closed, as if they had never been opened. "This here was used," he said. Renata finally moved forward, passing everyone. His eyes looked different. Pay closer attention, more connected. She observed the surroundings like someone recognizing a place they've never seen before. "It wasn't just used," she said. "It was repeated." Lucas frowned. "What do you mean by that?" Renata pointed around. "Look at the marks. They don't appear all at once. They're cyclical." Silence. And then a sound, not in steps, not doors, but something much closer, a whisper, low, almost inaudible, but it was there, and it didn't come from just one place. It came from all sides. Fernanda covered her ears. "Stop! Stop!" Caio turned slowly, trying to locate the source, but there was no direction. The voice, or voices, seemed to move along with them. Lucas took a step back. "This is some kind of acoustic, it must be." But then, the words began to form, fragmented, disconnected, but understandable. "To stay. Don't go out. To go back." Renata closed her eyes, and unlike the others, he listened, pay attention, as if he were trying to understand. "They didn't go away," she said, opening her eyes slowly. Fernanda shook her head in despair. "Stop it! These aren't people." Renata ignored her. His eyes were fixed on the chair. They stayed. Lucas got annoyed. "No one chooses to stay in a place like that." Renata turned to him, and for the first time there was something unsettling about his expression. "What if it's not a choice?" Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was filled with a presence, stronger, closer. Caio felt it first. A shiver ran down my spine, a clear feeling that there was something behind him. He turned around quickly. Nothing. But when he turned his gaze forward, Lucas was no longer in the same position. He had approached the chair, without realizing it. As if he had been drawn in. "Lucas!" Caio called. Lucas did not respond. His eyes were fixed on the handcuffs, his breathing slower, heavier. Renata was watching, without interfering, as if that were inevitable. "It doesn't even come close to that!" Fernanda shouted. But Lucas was already standing next to the chair. His hand moved slowly. He touched the cold metal, and then a snap, dry, high. The handcuffs closed, alone, restraining his wrist. The scream came immediately. "Let me go!" Lucas pulled hard, but the metal wouldn't budge. Caio ran towards him, trying to open the mechanism. "It won't open! It won't open!" Fernanda panicked. "We have to get out of here!" But there was no way out, because at that moment, The lights on the cell phone started to flicker, blinking, fluctuating, until they deleted it completely. Darkness took over, total, absolute, and in the dark, a sound, too close, breathing, not one, but of several, around, very close. Lucas stopped fighting. His body stiffened. Even in the dark, his eyes seemed fixed on something invisible. "He's here," she whispered. Kaio tried to stay in control. "Who?" The answer came, but not from Lucas. It came from somewhere else, from within the darkness, a low voice, dragged, old. "I never left." The turning point had been reached. They weren't just trapped in a living house. They were facing that which kept it functioning, and worse, that thing had now chosen one of them. Darkness was not merely the absence of light, it was a presence, dense, almost palpable. Kaio was still holding Lucas's arm, trying to pull it, trying to force open the handcuffs, but it was as if the metal were fused to the floor itself. Each attempt resulted only in a dry, futile sound that echoed through the basement, like a cruel reminder that there was no control whatsoever over the situation. "Stay with me," said Kaio, breathless. Lucas did not respond. His body was still there, strapped to the chair, but something had changed. His breathing continued, but irregularly, too slow at times, too fast at others, as if out of sync with his own body. Fernanda backed away in the darkness, stumbling over her own steps. "We need to get out of here. We need to get out of here now." But there was no direction. Without light, without reference points, the space seemed even larger, or perhaps smaller. It was impossible to know. The underground had lost any logical form. And then a metallic sound, another snap. Kaio froze. "Did you hear that?" Before anyone could answer, a second click echoed. Another handcuff, closing, alone, not in Lucas, but in something to the side, an empty space, as if there were another chair or another presence. Fernanda let out a stifled cry. "There's nothing there." But there was. They couldn't see, but they could feel it. The air was colder at that spot, heavier, as if someone were occupying that invisible space. Renata, unlike the others, did not move. His eyes were open even in the dark. She was listening, sincerely. "They are here," she said, in an almost serene tone. Kaio lost control. "Stop it! Help him!" Renata approached slowly. His steps were firm, calculated. She stopped next to Lucas. And then he touched his face. "Be careful." As if he were checking something. "There's still time," he murmured. "What's the point of having time?" Kaio shouted. Renata did not respond immediately, because at that moment Lucas spoke, but it wasn't the same voice. It was shorter, dragged, overlapping, as if two voices occupied the same space. "He needs..." Silence. "What do you need?" Kaio insisted. Lucas turned his head slightly. The movement was slow, artificial. "From someone in that place." Fernanda started to cry. No, this isn't real." But everything there was too real. The consequences were beginning to reveal themselves. That wasn't just a place that held people captive. It was a replacement mechanism. Something was getting in. Something remained. Something was being assumed. Kaio slowly released Lucas's arm, as if the touch had become dangerous. "This doesn't make sense. This can't be..." "Do it," Renata finally interrupted. "The house doesn't want everyone." Silence. "She wants continuity." Fernanda shook her head in despair. No, that's crazy." But then, a new sound. Steps, in the dark. More than one. Moving. Boards, next. Kaio spun around trying to locate it, but it was useless. "We're not alone down here." "It never was," Renata replied. And then something touched Fernanda's shoulder. She screamed, then recoiled abruptly. "Someone touched me!" Kaio tried to reach her, but ended up bumping into something, solid, cold, which wasn't there before. Another structure, another chair, or something similar. "There's more of this here," he said, his voice faltering. The pieces were falling into place too quickly now. Chairs, handcuffs, spaces occupied by invisible presences, and Lucas taken, replacing, or being prepared. Renata finally took a step back. His gaze was no longer one of curiosity. It was a time for decision. "We can still go out," she said. Caio turned to her, desperate. "What?" Renata took a deep breath. Someone needs to stay. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, irrecoverable. Fernanda stopped crying. I was just staring, unable to process. Caio took a step back. "No, don't even think about it." Renata did not respond, but his gaze said it all. She already understood, from the beginning, even before they entered. Lucas began to struggle again, but now it was different, weaker, further, away. "Don't let him," he murmured. But his voice was no longer just his own. The underground seemed to close in around them. The air is heavier, the closest presences, as if they were waiting, the decision. The consequences were now clear. They weren't fighting to get out. They were being forced to choose. Who wouldn't leave? The air underground seemed denser with each passing second, as if the environment itself were pressing for an immediate decision. The invisible presences continued to surround them, closer now, almost touching them, almost breathing alongside them. But something changed, not in space, in the characters. Caio was the first to react differently. Up until that moment, he had followed, observed, tried to rationalize, but now, faced with the impossible choice unfolding before them, something inside him broke. "No," he said, with unexpected firmness. The sound echoed differently in the room, as if that simple word carried weight. Renata stared at him. "Not what?" "There will be no choice," Caio replied, taking a step forward. "We're not leaving anyone here." Fernanda slowly raised her gaze. Her eyes were still full of fear, but there was something new there, an attempt to cling to that possibility. Renata remained silent for a few seconds. Then he said, "You still don't understand?" "Then explain it to me," Caio retorted, now more aggressive. "Because so far you've just accepted all of this as if it were normal." Tensions between the two grew rapidly. But this time, it wasn't just fear. It was a confrontation. Renata took a deep breath. "This isn't about escaping," she said, composed. "It's about preserving what already exists." "And who decided that?" Caio asked. Silence. The answer came from elsewhere, from the shadows. "Ooh." The word echoed like a collective whisper. It had no direction. It had no shape. But that was my intention. Fernanda took a step back, trembling. He's listening to us." Caio ignored his fear. He moved even closer to Lucas, trying to pull him away again. People together. But Lucas no longer reacted in the same way. His body was there, but his presence, no. Renata watched everything with increasing attention. And then she did something different. He knelt down. He ran his hand along the floor around the chair. He felt the marks, the layers, the standards. "It's not random," he murmured. Caio looked at her, annoyed. "Are you going to analyze this now?" "Shut up," she replied firmly. It was the first time his voice came out with real authority. Caio fell silent, not through submission, but because he realized it. Renata was no longer just reacting. She understood, in truth. Fernanda approached slowly. "What did you see?" Renata ran her fingers along one of the deep marks in the floor. "This isn't just dragging. It's repetition of movement." She pointed to the other marks around her. "Always the same pattern, always the same route." Caio frowned. "So what?" Renata stood up slowly. "This isn't just a prison. Silence, it's a ritual." The atmosphere seemed to react to the word. The air grew even heavier. The presences that are closest, as if that were too true. Fernanda put her hand to her mouth. "Ritual of what?" Renata looked at Lucas. "In exchange." Everything suddenly started to make sense. The chairs, the handcuffs, the invisible presences, the voices. It wasn't just imprisonment. It was maintenance. Something old, repeated, fueled by people who came in, and didn't leave. Caio shook his head, trying to deny it. So, you're saying that this will never end? Renata stared at him. Not like that. Silence. But then, she took a step forward, approaching the chair. From the handcuffs, from the shadows. But maybe we're doing it wrong. Caio's eyes widened. What? Renata pointed at Lucas. He was chosen because he reacted. Fernanda tried to understand. How did he react? Fear, resistance, struggle, Renata replied. That's what this place feeds on. The silence that followed was dense, heavy, but different, because now there was a possibility. Caio took a deep breath. So what do we do? Renata looked around, into the dark, for the invisible presences, and then he said, "We stop playing the game." Fernanda frowned. How? Renata answered without hesitation, not reacting. Caio let out a nervous laugh. Are you telling us to just accept it? No, she said. I'm saying we shouldn't give him what he wants. The silence was broken by a new sound, closer, more aggressive. The presences were moving, faster, more restless, as if they could perceive the change, as if that were a threat. Lucas began to squirm slightly, but now, not like before. It was different, weaker, more unstable, as if something was losing control over him. Renata moved even closer, and then he placed his hand on the handcuff, without hesitation, without fear. Let him go. Absolute silence. Nothing happened. But the atmosphere has changed. The attendant stopped for a moment. Caio held his breath. Fernanda closed her eyes, and then a sound. Low, deep, irritated, like something being contradicted for the first time in a long time. The house didn't react like before, not immediately, and that was new. The growth was clear. They were no longer just running away, not just reacting. They were facing each other. I understand. And for the first time, challenging that which controlled everything. But there was a risk, because by breaking the pattern, they could also be causing something far worse. The deep sound that echoed after Renata's order did not completely disappear. He stayed, vibrating no environment, as a warning, or worse, as a restrained response. The underground seemed different now, no longer just oppressive. There was an active tension in the air, as if something was being forced to adapt. The invisible presences no longer moved in the same way. Before, they were silent, calculated. Now there was agitation, unease, as if they were losing control. Caio noticed first. That has changed, he said, looking around. Fernanda nodded, breathing with difficulty. It seems like it got worse. Renata did not respond immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the handcuff fastened to Lucas's wrist. She didn't try to pull. He didn't try to force it. He just kept his hand there, steady. Don't react, she said in a low voice. How do you know this will work? Caio asked tensely. I don't know, Renata replied, but I know the other way doesn't work. Silence. Lucas was still imprisoned, but something within him had changed. His body, once rigid, now trembled slightly. His breathing was slowly returning to a more natural rhythm, but not completely. It's as if you were between two states, imprisoned, but not completely subdued. Fernanda approached slowly. Lucas, can you hear me? For a second, nothing happened. Then, a slight movement, almost imperceptible. The fingers of the free hand contracted. Caio stepped forward immediately. He's coming back. But Renata raised her hand, preventing any sudden action. Don't touch him, but don't touch it. Her tone was definitive, and at that moment, everyone understood. Any wrong move could undo everything. The surrounding space began to respond. The walls seemed to vibrate slightly. A deep sound began to grow, as if it were coming from inside the structure of the house, not just from the basement, but from everywhere. The whole house, reacting. Fernanda put her hands to her head. This is going to collapse. No, said Renata. That's something else entirely. She finally removed her hand from the handcuff, and he took a step back, observing, waiting. The sound got louder. The presences started moving again, but now faster, more aggressive, as if they were being forced to act. Kaio was spinning, trying to keep up. They're closer. Indeed, they were. The air around them felt compressed, as if invisible bodies were accumulating around them. Lucas started speaking again, but this time, his voice was fragmented, interrupted. It was as if it were being pulled in opposite directions. No, don't leave it. Renata observed everything with maximum intensity. He's still being pulled, she said. Then we'll get him out of there, Kaio replied, already moving. But before he could touch, an invisible impact threw him backward. He fell hard to the ground. Kaio! Fernanda shouted, running towards him. I'm fine, he said with difficulty. But that was enough. The warning was clear. There was no room for force. It's just a strategy. Renata closed her eyes for a brief moment, organizing everything, every detail, each pattern, every reaction from the house. When it opened again, his expression was different, decided. This isn't just a ritual of exchange, she said. It's a system of control. Fernanda was helping Kaio to get up. So what? Renata pointed around. He needs us to panic, fight, try to get out, because that's how he keeps the cycle going. Silence. But now we've broken that. The surrounding noise grew louder, more unstable, as if to confirm it. Kaio wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. Then why haven't you released him yet? Renata replied without hesitation. Because it's not over yet. The silence that followed was broken by a new event. Something has changed in space. One of the walls. It moved, slowly, revealing an opening, a new path. But it wasn't like the others. There was light, weak, distant, but it's real. Fernanda's eyes widened. Is that a way out? Kaio looked at him suspiciously. Or another trap? Renata watched for a few seconds, without moving. No, she said. This is the climax of the cycle. Silence. He always offers a way out. Fernanda took a step forward. Then we'll go. Not yet, Renata replied. How could you not? Shouted Kaio. Renata pointed at Lucas. He's not going to leave like that. Lucas remained in prison, but now, struggling less, more divided, as if something inside him was being slowly ripped out, or struggling to stay. The light in the opening flickered, unstable, as if it had a deadline, as if it wouldn't last long. Those around them began to stir even more, closer, denser. The deep sound grew louder. Everything was accelerating. Time was running out. Renata took a deep breath. When this opens up completely, we have a chance. Kaio looked at her, exhausted. Chance of what? Renata answered, staring at the light in the background. To leave. A pause. Then he added, or to stay forever. The final moment was approaching. The way out was right there. The system was unstable. Lucas is still in prison, and at home, for the first time, he seemed vulnerable. The light in the opening began to pulse, weak, unstable, as if it were about to disappear at any moment. The deep sound that echoed through the basement was now deafening. The walls vibrated, the floor seemed to tremble slightly, and the invisible presences were no longer hiding. They were there, compressing the space, circulating, pressing down. That was the end of it. There was no more time to think. Now's the time! Shouted Kaio. Fernanda gripped his arm tightly. And what about Lucas? Lucas was still strapped into the chair, but something had changed drastically. His body trembled uncontrollably, as if he were being pierced by something he couldn't fully bear. His head fell forward, and then he stood up. The eyes, they were no longer the same, but they weren't entirely different either. It was as if two presences were fighting inside him. Go on, he said with effort. The voice came out double, tearing apart. Go away. Renata didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on him, analyzing, calculating. Not yet, she said. "Renata!" shouted Kaio. "We don't have time!" The opening began to fluctuate more intensely. The light was flickering. The shadows around them moved forward, as if they were trying to stop it. Fernanda started crying again. "We're going to die here." But Renata stepped forward, towards Lucas, towards the chair. "No," she said, "we're going to finish this." The environment reacted immediately. An invisible impact traveled through space, like a pressure wave. The presences shifted, faster, more aggressive, as if that were forbidden. Kaio tried to stop it. "Don't come near me!" But Renata was already there, in front of Lucas. She cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "Listen," she said firmly. "You're still there." Lucas was trembling. Their eyes darted back and forth. "No, I know," she interrupted, "but you're still there." The sound around us grew louder. Their presences drew even closer, almost touching, almost visible. Fernanda backed away until she almost fell. "They are coming." Kaio was looking between the exit and Renata, divided. Renata brought her face closer to Lucas's. "You don't have to stay." Silence. For a second, the world seemed to stop. And then Lucas reacted. In truth, his eyes returned. For a moment. Clear, humans. "I don't want—" The sentence came out broken, but it was enough. Renata let go of his face. And without hesitation, he put his own arm in the handcuff. The realization came immediately, high, definitive. Kaio shouted, "No!" Fernanda put her hands to her head. "What did you do?" But Renata didn't react. She just looked at Lucas, calm, decided. Now it's going to happen. The atmosphere exploded in reaction. The deep sound turned into a roar. The presences stirred violently, as if that broke something fundamental. Lucas was propelled forward. Book, the handcuff that held him, opened. Alone, he fell to the ground, panting, confused but conscious. "Get up!" shouted Kaio, pulling him up. Lucas tried to stand up, still disoriented. "Renata," but she didn't answer, because now it was a time of her. His body began to stiffen, his breathing had changed, but his gaze, he was still lucid. "Go!" she shouted. The opening began to close. The light was fading rapidly. The shadows advanced. "Time's up." Kaio pulled Lucas forcefully. Fernanda ran ahead. The three of them moved towards the light, but Lucas resisted. "No, we can't leave her!" Kaio held on tighter. It was her choice. Lucas looked back. Renata was still there, taken, but smiling. A different kind of smile, not out of fear, not even out of despair, but from someone who understood and accepted. "It's over," she said. The word echoed, not just for them, but for everything. The opening began to collapse. The light is almost fading away. Kaio made the decision. He dragged Lucas away. He forced it. Fernanda had already crossed. Lucas shouted, "Renata!" But it was too late. They crossed over. The light went out, the window closed, the sound stopped. Silence. Total. On the other side, the air was different. Live. Real. They were outside, but not whole. Because something remained, and something changed. The climax wasn't just about escape. It was a swap. But this time conscious. And that? It changed everything. The silence outside did not bring immediate relief. He seemed strange, artificial, as if the real world had lost some of its consistency after what they had experienced inside. Lucas fell to his knees as soon as they were completely through. His breathing was uneven, his eyes unsteady, trying to process something that defied human logic. He could still feel the metal on his wrist, even though he was no longer restrained. Kaio remained standing, looking back. To the place where the entrance should be, but there was nothing else. Not a door, not even an opening, not a sign of the mansion, just trees, dense, silent, as if that place had never existed. Fernanda noticed it too. The house disappeared. His voice came out weak, almost without strength. Kaio ran his hand over his face, trying to understand. No, she didn't disappear. A pause. She just won't let us go back. Lucas finally managed to stand up, though still unsteady. His eyes were searching, desperate. We need to go back. Fernanda shook her head immediately. No, we're not going back there. She's there, Lucas insisted. She stayed there because of us. A heavy silence fell, because, deep down, everyone knew that wasn't exactly true. Renata hadn't stayed there by accident. She had made her choice. Caio approached slowly. She did what needed to be done. Lucas turned to him angrily. You're saying that as if it were normal. That's not normal, Caio replied, raising his voice for the first time. But it was the only way. Fernanda started crying again, but now it was different. It wasn't immediate panic anymore. It was the weight of what had happened, irreversible. Lucas stepped back a few paces, running his hands through his hair. We could have found a way. No, said Caio firmly. I couldn't. Silence. The wind finally blew through the trees, bringing a real sound. Natural. But even so, it wasn't enough to dispel the feeling that something was still wrong, because it was. Lucas looked at his own wrist. There was a mark. Deep, as if the handcuffs were still there. But it wasn't just physics. It was something else. Something that remained. He's still with me, she murmured. Fernanda stared at him, frightened. What? Lucas slowly raised his gaze. I can feel it. Caio frowned. Feel what? Lucas took a while to reply, as if afraid to put it into words. At home. Silence. Fernanda took a step back. Don't say that. But Lucas continued. It's not just the place. It's like a living thing. And I left there, but... He stopped. He took a deep breath. But a part of her never left me. Caio remained silent, because judging by the way Lucas spoke, it didn't seem crazy. It seemed real. Fernanda tried to deny it. This is trauma, sir, that's all. But even she didn't completely believe it. Lucas closed his eyes for a moment. And then an image came to mind. Quick, Clara, the subsoil, the chair, Renata, but not like before. She was there, still in jail, but consciously observing, and for a brief second, she smiled. Lucas opened his eyes abruptly. It's not over. Caio looked at him. What? This isn't over, Lucas repeated. She's still there. But not like the others. Silence. The weight of it all slowly fell upon them. If what Lucas said was true, so Renata was not just another victim. She had become part of the system, but in a different way, conscious, and that meant one thing. The cycle had not only continued, he had changed. Fernanda hugged her own body. I just want to get out of here. Caio nodded. Go to people. But before you leave, he looked at the forest one last time, to the spot where the mansion should be. And, for a brief moment, he had the impression of seeing something. A silhouette, a stop among the trees, observing. Property. He blinked. It disappeared. None of the three said anything more. They started walking back down the road. In silence, each step took them further physically away from that place, but not completely. Because some things don't stay confined to one space. They continue, they adapt, and they wait. The conclusion was clear. They had left, they had survived, but they hadn't won. Because what existed in that mansion, it still existed, and now, perhaps stronger. Months later, the road reappeared, not on maps, but in reports. People began talking about an isolated building, hidden among trees, somewhere forgotten in the United States. Some said it was an old house, others a mansion. Always the same description, always the same detail, the feeling of being watched even before arriving. Lucas never went back there, but sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night, certain that I didn't need to, because in dreams, or something beyond them, he was walking through the underground again. And in the center of the darkness, she was still there, property, observing, waiting. But now, I wasn't alone. This story doesn't end when you close your eyes, or when the screen goes black, because the real question isn't what happened to them. That's what you would do. Would you go in, even knowing that some places don't want to be found? Just fed? Comment below. Would you have the courage to explore this mansion, or would you have left at the first sign that something was wrong? And more importantly, if I were inside, who would you save? Or rather, would you have the courage to choose who would stay? If this story captivated you until the end, share it with someone who loves dark mysteries, because perhaps without realizing it, you're inviting someone else in as well.